I'm going to talk today about building bridges between legacy and decentralized ecosystems to fund public goods. So, I bet this is not a surprise, but building a community is very, very, very hard work. I've learned this the hard way. This is ancient history, but way back when I was actually young, I co-founded a political party in Argentina called the Net Party. And over there, you'll see my friend Gonzalo organizing manually thousands of slips that we needed to get alphabetically, thousands of slips from signatures that we had to get in order for the government to say, okay, great, you're a legal entity, you can actually participate in the game. We were so hell-bent in hacking the system that we even built a Trojan horse and paraded around the streets of Buenos Aires. But I'll tell you about that tonight. And then below there is a group that was participating of climate hackers, climate activists, and they got together to kind of hack on solutions for climate emergency. So hacking together is great, but after a while, it gets really difficult to sustain these efforts in time because all of these are decentralized groups. They're communities that don't have a legal entity. They don't really want a legal entity, but they do want to receive funding to fund their activities. It's not sustainable for us to keep thinking about communities as only volunteer work. So the collectives of the internet era are defined by peer production, global non-territorial communities. So everyone here, and open source is like the best example of that. We are contributing on platforms online, on different spaces, but we are everywhere in the world. But however, the financial system insists that if we want to use money, and that money needs to be connected to the legacy world, we need to be somewhere in the world, which is perplexing, right? Because where are you going to be? So it's very difficult for these decentralized communities to build trust because they are decentralized. They don't often meet face-to-face, even if we're traveling now, but it's very difficult to build trust. So transparency is very, very important. And so we need transparent money flows in this system. And also hierarchy is like old school, right? It's who's the president of the internet. And so DAOs are a solution to this problem of how do we fund decentralized communities around the world. I don't have to explain to this audience what DAOs are, so we're going to move forward with what are the problems with DAOs. So the first problem is coordination versus decentralization, right? The ethos of DAOs are, it's a decentralized structure that uses blockchain to coordinate actions in a self-executing way. However, some decisions need to be made in a more centralized way, or we need to find ways of weighing expertise over non-expertise when we make certain decisions. So there's always inside DAOs, there's always this kind of inherent tension to the mechanism itself that has to do with how much do we centralize in order to get shit done versus how much we are decentralized, but then everyone gets a vote, right? So, and everyone gets a say, which makes things happening very difficult. Because the second challenge with DAOs is that there are actual humans in the DAOs. And the challenges of participation, the challenges of building a community, they didn't change with the technology changes. They're the same. Participation is hard. People, like there's like an initial spurt of participation where everyone wants to join, and then you have a couple of maintainers trying to kind of, push the community forward, doing the really kind of difficult task and unglamorous task of sustaining something in time when they might be like new shinier objects out there. So the humans in DAOs make it so that some of the challenges that exist in like the fiat world exist also in the DAO space. So, and the last challenge with DAOs is the lack of legacy infrastructure. And for me, this is a bug as much as it is a feature. I know that for DAOs, the lack of connecting to the legacy infrastructure, named fiat space, legacy world, is a feature of DAOs because that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to build this kind of new system that renders the existing system obsolete. And that's fantastic, except most people actually need to be connected to the legacy system, right? Most people still need things like proof of income, payslips, invoices, right? They need to prove to their landlord that they actually have money. They need to be somewhere in the world and talk to a government and prove to a government that they have income. Most people in this community need a mortgage, right? They can't just go and sell their coins and buy a house, right? So this kind of lack of legacy infrastructure, of legal, admin infrastructure in DAOs, which is, again, part of how DAOs are built, it's also a bug because it has this unintended consequence that a lot of the people that would like to participate in this ecosystem cannot, because we have no way still of connecting to the legacy system, right? So it seems to me that what used to be the way things used to run is no longer a fit for our needs. This is obvious, right? We are, and I think Juan said it before, but we are in the 21st century. We are trying to interact with institutions that were designed in a very different century with a very different technology, namely the printing press, right? And we're still trying to navigate this horrible, horrible system. So it's no longer fit for our needs. The communities of the internet era have nothing to do with that kind of territorial organization of power. However, what will be is not fully here yet, right? DAOs as an experiment, as a sandbox for experimentation are amazing, but in truth, like if we do want to bring people over from the legacy system to this new world that we are trying to create, we're not really here, right? And I think that there's part of the problem that I see with this is that, and I'll explain this later, hang on. This is the framework that I use. It's called the Three Horizons framework, and we're applying this towards a regenerative culture. So I think we're in this middle of this really turbulent transition, right? What used to work no longer works. That's very clear. We've known this forever, right? Not in the economic system, not in the financial system, not even, like, certainly not in the political system, right? So the way things used to operate are no longer a fit for us. But what's coming is not here yet. And we are like stuck in the middle trying to, figure out what on earth we want to do and how to build this. And so the world in crisis is the first horizon, okay? And technology built for the world in crisis, anything that we build in that space is kind of sustaining, we call it sustaining innovation. It's innovation that keeps the lights on, that maintains the status quo, that maintains those in power in power. And don't forget, power is conservative, right? The status quo will do anything to stay in power. Like the existing system will try to self-perpetuate. Well, that's like with every strategy mechanism that it can, because that's the nature of power. It wants to self-perpetuate and stay in power. So world in crisis, that's sustaining innovation. And then we are in this transition moment where we have disruptive innovation, right? And here is great, right? We identify opportunities that change the scope of what's possible. Before, you weren't able to print money. Now you can print your own money. That is amazing, right? That is a huge change, and it certainly changed the scope of what is possible. Before, the only coordination that was happening was inside of nation-state scope. Now you can do decentralized coordination, right? At scale, at global scale, because you have blockchains. So, but the problem here, and this is like what I really want to talk about, and now I'm the sounding the bells kind of person today, is like unless we build technology today with those who are the losers of the current system, we are just going to build disruptive innovation that is going to make those who are the winners today even more winners, right? Because we are going to end up making the VCs of this world, the high net worth individuals, the whales of this world have even more money, right? Because we are not really bringing in those who are losers at the design phase of all the technology that we are building, right? And if those who are building the current technology, the technology for the future, have the biases of the previous system because they're winners of the previous system, we are gonna bring those biases into anything that we will build for the future, right? And so the risk is just sustaining the status quo. So a viable world, the future, which is the third horizon, which is what I'm interested in building for, and what I think all here we're trying to build for, is transformative innovation. It's innovation that facilitates the transition towards regenerative cultures. But in order for this to happen, we need to stop looking at our belly buttons for, not saying taking our head out of our, and really, really bring those who today are not participating in the current system to involve them in the design and the building of the new technology. Otherwise, we're not really going to achieve regenerative culture. So, segue on what I'm doing now, and this is the framework. So, Open Collective has been sustaining decentralized fiat communities since 2016, right? This is, and Xavier here, I think, who's sitting, it's my co-founder, and he designed this slide, so I'm glad he's here to see that it's still put to use. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but it's a good slide. Anyway, this is what Open Collective does. We created an open source platform for transparent management of funds. So it enables communities that do not have any organizational structure at all to create a collective and start receiving funding for their communities. Now, this funding, it goes to what we call fiscal hosts, which essentially is a network of nonprofit entities around the world that are like custodials of the funds of the, for those organizations, for those collectives. And those nonprofits are connected to the existing world. So it's less glamorous in the sense that we're still dealing with a lot of like clunky and old operating system, but we are enabling a lot of communities to be able to fund themselves, sustain themselves, and hire their members with benefits, with actual invoices, with pay slips, right? So it all started with a need to fund open source projects. I'm not gonna repeat the talk that we just heard because it was really, really good, but open source is like a non-excludable public good, means that it's not scarce. Once it's out there, like it's in the world, and there is no marginal cost for another person to use the code. There is no cost for the user, right? There's a ton of cost for the maintainer though, but. And that's how, so we started by trying to figure out how on earth we're gonna sustain open source projects, because it's not sustainable that the building blocks of the infrastructure that we use are maintained by very few people in a kind of volunteer way. I'm not gonna go into that because I think we're all aware of like the perils of open source, but that's how we started. Right now, we have moved over $105 million into the hands of communities, and we have over 15,000 communities that have joined the platform. And we are funding multiple public goods, commons, grassroots communities, climate activists, data trust, social and political movements, right? So we really branched out from open source, and we started funding a lot of different public goods via this mechanism. So this is where the interesting part comes. Sustainability refers to the resilience and the thriving of projects, communities, and individuals that surround them, right? And so we can fund a community, we can fund a project, but we need to think about the individuals, the humans in the equation, right? And again, most of those humans can't really handle themselves with tokens, and not because they're not smart, but or crypto, and it's not because they're not smart, but because they need to prove to their landlord that they actually have an income, so they let them rent an apartment, right? They need invoices. Someone needs to actually show a piece of paper somewhere, right? And that is, I think, what Open Collective can offer that DAOs need, and I think that the synergy here is amazing. And so what can we bridge with the legacy system to make decentralized communities sustainable? Tax deductibility for donors, so charities, foundations, endowments, being able to put money into funding public goods via a mechanism they understand, right? It's not about being right, it's about being efficient, right? It's not about being kind of fancy or new tech, because this is like boring old tech, super Web 2, although Kevin here says Web 2.5. Thank you, I appreciate it, but no. And so, he's just my friend. And so we offer tax deductibility for donors, invoices, pay stubs, insurance, benefits, employment. We are now offering employment to a lot of community members, right? Got it, 5 minutes. We're almost there. So we are here to offer a bridge from legacy system to DAOs, right? We want to collaborate to help Web3 ecosystem work together, co-create, co-design communities with grassroots culture and low-tech solution. Look, folks, a lot of the people that we work with, PayPal is high-tech, right? And we cannot forget about that. We can't ignore that, because if we ignore that, we're just building our own biases into this tech that we're thinking is going to replace nation states, right? So we must bring into the design, into the conversation, those who are today not able to participate. And that means both kind of the global North majority world kind of conversation, which of course bringing developers, designers, community managers, community folks from the majority world, but also bringing in folks that are not coders, that are not developers, who are grassroots community organizers who are at the forefront of trying to fight the major problems that we have today. One example of cooperation is our Fund.ss run that we did a while ago, and Kevin and me keep thinking about bringing this back. But essentially, we did a quadratic funding experiment using Gitcoin to fund open source projects, Web 2 open source projects. I think we can do more of this. Radical, I think Ella is around here. Radical is also like a really interesting project because they are funding developers, but those developers, again, they need to be employed somewhere. They need, some sort of proof of income. They need some sort of benefits. So I think we can really provide this. Now, Open Collective, and I need to say, to name this, there is a trade-off in what we do, right? There is like there's a power dynamic with existing legal entities. And the system, like the incentives are sometimes not fully aligned. And so, because the existing legal entities that receive the money for these collectives are holding all the money for the collectives, right? So there's like this difficult and tense power dynamic situation that we need to think about. On top of that, there's this power dynamics between the platform and the collectives and the fiscal host. So how we're thinking about this is E2C, which is exit to community. We would love to have the community own the tech platform that serves them, right? And this is easier said than done, to be honest. We've been thinking about this for many years. We're taking really profound steps toward this year, and we have more coming out. But how can we make a decentralized community from people from all over the world own and manage the technology that they use to sustain themselves? So Open Collective is building a trust. Got it. Open Collective is building a trust that is going to take ownership of the open source software. The platform is going to stay managed by the company, but the idea is that community members, collectives, as well as fiscal hosts can be kind of stewards on that trust of this technology. We want to ensure that we are not also baking in our own biases into the technology that we build. So the goal here is to co-create and co-design collective tech with grassroots culture and access. And this is super important. And democratizing, which is something that here Web3 kind of ethos is very, very strong about. But it's not just about opening access. It's not just about here you have a token, now go govern yourself. That doesn't work like that. Communities are not, we need to learn how to do this. We need to experience this. And so it's as much about open access as it is about shared and participatory governance, right? So the TLDR is do not sleep on culture. Look, democratic culture is upstream of democratic institutions. So you need to build that from the get-go. It's not enough to build cool tech, then turn around and tell folks what do you think? That it doesn't work like that because you're already on a trajectory. You need to bring in people who are not participating who are not the winners of the current system at the design level before you start building your tech. So if culture and the humanity of a community gets away from you, there is no consensus mechanism that is going to save your community, as fancy as it is. It's just not going to happen. So do not forget about this.